In the glittering heart of Manhattan, a billionaire raised his platinum card like a weapon and dared a waitress to dance for his amusement. $10,000 dangled in the air, meant to buy her pride and humiliate her before the powerful elite. But when Katerina Volkov stepped into the spotlight, she didn't crumble, she ignited. Her bare feet struck the marble like thunder, her body spilling rage, grief, and brilliance into every movement. Within seconds, the room was silenced, and the man who thought he owned everything was about to lose far more than his arrogance. What happened next would shock the entire city. The dining room glowed like a temple of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline of Manhattan, each tower a jeweled shard against the night. Waiters in sharp black uniforms moved swiftly, their steps soundless against polished marble floors. Crystal glasses chimed faintly. The scent of truffle oil mingled with expensive cologne, wrapping the room in an invisible veil of wealth. At the corner booth, a man sat with the confidence of someone who owned not only the restaurant but the entire world beneath its glass walls. Damian Cross, 34 years old, CEO of Cross Global, leaned back in a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit. His dark slate eyes glittered with amusement as he swirled an aged scotch in his glass. His associates laughed at his sharp remarks, their voices carrying easily across the hushed room. Damian's reputation preceded him. Ruthless, brilliant, and merciless in business, he had built his empire by devouring smaller companies with the precision of a shark. Tonight was a celebration of yet another conquest, and his two companions raised their glasses with triumphant smirks. To them, loyalty was a tool, people were assets, and dignity was a currency to be traded. Into this world of glittering arrogance stepped Katerina Volkov. For 2 years, the restaurant had been her battlefield. She wore the uniform like armor, her honey blonde hair pulled tightly into a bun, her face schooled into polite neutrality. Each night she carried trays of wine worth more than her rent, served men and women who would never remember her name, and endured conversations laced with power she would never touch. Yet she moved with a grace that went unnoticed. Her steps were measured. Her hands never trembled, even when balancing fragile porcelain. She poured a vintage Bordeaux as if it were a sacred act. Patrons glanced at her only long enough to dismiss her. To them she was invisible, part of the decor, a shadow that carried plates. She approached Damian's table with her usual quiet composure. He had not acknowledged her once during the evening. She refilled his glass, laid another dish before him, and turned away without waiting for thanks. But Damian's eyes followed her this time. There was something in the way her shoulders held straight, the way her movements were so controlled, so precise. To him, it was not dignity. It was subservience. A cruel idea, born of ego and alcohol, stirred in his mind. He wanted to make a point, to prove that even the strongest posture could bend under money. He leaned back, his lips curving into a predatory smile. "Waitress," he called. Katerina froze for an instant before turning toward him. Her heart quickened, but her face remained calm. She approached the booth with her hands clasped neatly behind her back. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady. Damian did not invite her closer. He let her stand at the edge of the booth, as though she were a servant awaiting orders from a king. He slid a sleek black wallet from his pocket and drew out a platinum credit card. Instead of handing it to her, he pointed it like a weapon, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. "I have a proposition," he said, his voice low but carrying easily through the room. His companions stilled, their expressions sharpening with curiosity. "My associate here believes that some people possess a dignity that cannot be bought. I disagree. I say everyone has a price." The room grew quiet. Conversations faltered. Silverware paused midair. Damian tapped the card on the table. "I'll pay you $10,000. All you have to do is dance for us. Right here, right now. Prove you're more than a tray carrier." A murmur swept through nearby tables. Shock. Curiosity. Disbelief. The spectacle was unfolding in front of the city's wealthiest elite. Katerina's breath caught. A flush crept up her neck. $10,000 was more than a month's wages. It was medication for her brother Nico. It was hospital bills and therapy sessions. It was survival. But the way Damien's words dripped with mockery cut deeper than any financial desperation. He was not offering kindness. He was offering humiliation. He wanted her to squirm, to bend, to crumble before the weight of his money. Her manager hurried toward the table, his face pale, but Damien raised one hand. The silent command was enough. No one interfered with Damien Cross. Katerina's gaze met his. His smirk was full of certainty. He believed he had already won. Inside her chest, a fire stirred. For a heartbeat the entire room held its breath. The last notes from the grand piano lingered in the air like smoke, and then even that faded. Glass stems stopped midair. Conversations died. Wealth watched a waitress. Damien Cross tilted his chin, a king settling deeper into his throne. His platinum card glinted against the table, a shard of cold light. Katerina Volkov did not reach for it. She let the silence stretch until it became a thread she could pull. Her voice, when it came, was clear and steady. I accept. The word struck like a bell. A few diners exhaled. Others leaned in. Damien's mouth curved into a victorious smile, the kind that expected surrender to follow. Good, he said. Right here. Clear a space. Not here, Katerina replied. There. She pointed to the open marble before the grand piano, a pool of light framed by the city beyond the glass. And you will pay first. A ripple of surprise rolled through the booth. Damien's associates traded glances. One, a broad-shouldered man with careful eyes, shifted in his seat as if uncomfortable. The other, narrow and fox-like, smirked and lifted his glass. Damien drummed 2 fingers against the table. The gesture was lazy, confident, absolute. A server hurried over with a portable card terminal balanced on a tray. Damien did not look away from Katerina as he tapped the card. Numbers flashed. A slip of paper printed with a tiny mechanical whir. 10,000, he said, holding out the receipt between 2 fingers like a prize given to a child. Earn it. Katerina took the slip. Her hand did not tremble. She folded it once and slid it into the pocket of her apron as if storing a lifeline. In her mind she saw a hospital corridor washed in white. She saw Nico's thin wrists, the brave smile he wore like armor, the bills that arrived like winter storms. 10,000 was not a windfall. It was time. It was movement. It was another door kept open. Her manager, Mr. Henderson, arrived at the edge of the booth, breath quick, eyes frantic. Miss Volkov, step away from the table. Mr. Cross, this is highly inappropriate. Damien did not bother to look at him. It is already done. Katerina turned to the manager. It is my decision, she said. Please ask the pianist if I may borrow the floor for 5 minutes. Her tone made it sound like a courtesy rather than a plea. Mr. Henderson hesitated, swallowed, and retreated, pulled by the current he could not stop. Katerina walked to the piano. The light found her as if it had been waiting. She stood very still, feeling the room's gaze press against her skin. She reached up and loosened the pins from her bun one by one, each pin a tiny sound in the hush. Honey blonde waves fell over her shoulders, catching the chandelier's glow. She bent and slipped off her low heels, leaving them neatly beside the bench. Bare feet on marble. Cool. Solid. Honest. She straightened and lifted her chin. The skyline glittered beyond the glass, a constellation of windows. Her reflection looked back at her, not as a server, not as an invisible shadow, but as a woman about to cross a threshold she had once believed was sealed forever. Behind her, Damien shifted, preparing himself for indulgent entertainment. His smile sharpened. The fox-eyed associate leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. The broad-shouldered one watched with a tight jaw, the line of a conscience not entirely erased by wealth. Katerina inhaled. It was a deep, rooted breath that reached the soles of her feet. She let it climb up through shins and knees, steadying her hips, lifting her sternum. She let it broaden her back until her shoulder blades floated wide and light. She rolled her wrists and felt heat coil in her palms. The old language stirred in her muscles, the one she had learned before grief translated everything into survival. No music. Not yet. She would not dance to a command. She would dance to a story. Her story. She glanced once at Mr. Henderson. He stood at the edge of the light, hands clasped, eyes wet and hard with worry. The pianist hovered respectfully on his closed bench, gaze lowered, as if in chapel. Katerina looked back at Damien. He lounged like a judge. She held his gaze until his smile faltered by a fraction. Then she turned away from him and let him vanish. She closed her eyes. A memory rose. Resin and wood, the smell of a studio at dawn. The scrape of a teacher's voice, the discipline that had once carved strength into love. Another memory followed, colder. A hospital elevator, the mechanical sigh of doors, the stiff ache in her back after long shifts. Nico sleeping with headphones on, a brave song set to a thin pulse. The room waited. The city held still beyond the glass. Somewhere in the kitchen a timer clicked and was smothered by a careful hand. When she opened her eyes, the world narrowed to a circle of light and the line of her own breath. Katerina shifted her weight to the ball of her right foot. Her left heel lifted. Her fingers unfurled. Then she moved. The first movement was almost nothing, a slow extension of her arms as though pressing against an invisible weight. Her fingers trembled, curled, and closed into fists. The air in the dining room seemed to tighten. A woman at a nearby table touched her own throat, sensing the silent scream embedded in the gesture. Damien Cross leaned forward, brows drawn. He had expected clumsy steps, an awkward shuffle meant to entertain. Instead he was watching something alive. Something dangerous. Katerina Volkov shifted her stance and released her fists. The energy shot through her body like lightning. Her bare feet tapped out a rhythm against the marble floor, sharp, percussive, almost defiant. The sound echoed beneath the chandeliers, filling the silence with a heartbeat that belonged to her alone. Then she launched. Her body snapped into motion, a torrent of strength controlled by precision. She spun, the whirl of her hair catching the light like a golden flame. She leapt, her silhouette framed against the city skyline. Every line of her body spoke a language older than money, older than power. Gasps escaped from corners of the room. Diners leaned forward, wine forgotten, phones lowering mid-recording. Even the staff froze. For years they had seen her glide between tables, invisible as a shadow. Tonight she burned. Her dance was not polished sweetness. It was raw. It was grief carved into form. The arc of her arms carried the ache of parents lost in a car crash. The contraction of her torso held the suffocating pressure of years spent fighting debt. Every desperate turn carried the love that chained her life to Nico's survival. Damien felt it. Each movement cracked through his armor, a soundless impact against the certainty he had worn for years. He prided himself on recognizing value, on spotting the hidden worth of companies, of people. Yet here he had mistaken genius for servitude, a Stradivarius for a cheap fiddle. The broad-shouldered associate leaned closer, whispering to Damien, "Who is she?" Damien could not answer. His mouth was dry. Katerina's body twisted into a series of pirouettes, spinning faster and faster until the chandeliers blurred. She stopped suddenly, feet planted wide, shoulders heaving. Sweat gleamed at her temples. Her chest rose and fell like a battle drum. She was not performing for applause. She was surviving. And then she leapt. A grand jeté across the marble, but it was not joyous. It was desperate, clawing, as if she were reaching for a life just out of reach. When she landed, the floor seemed to shiver beneath her. She slowed. Her arms dropped. Her body folded in on itself, curling down until she crouched low, head bowed, hair spilling forward to curtain her face. Silence fell again. The city outside blinked in cold indifference. Inside, every eye was fixed on her. Seconds stretched. Her shoulders shook once, twice, as if with sobs. But slowly, painfully, she began to rise. Vertebra by vertebra, she unfurled, straightening her spine until she stood tall again. Her head lifted last, eyes blazing, jaw hard with defiance. It was a declaration. "You will not break me." The silence deepened, heavy and electric. Then a single pair of hands began to clap. It was the broad-shouldered associate. His palms struck together again, louder, firmer, until he rose to his feet. Others followed. Hesitant at first, then with conviction. Applause filled the room, growing into a storm. Diners, billionaires, socialites, they stood for a waitress. Crystal glasses rattled on tables. The chandeliers seemed to tremble with the sound. Katerina did not bow. She did not smile. Her eyes stayed locked on Damien. His face, once sharp with arrogance, was pale, his expression hollow. She held his gaze until the applause became nothing but a roar in his ears. Then, without a word, she turned. She retrieved her shoes from the floor, slipped them on with deliberate calm, and walked out of the circle of light. She passed the pianist, who dipped his head as if in reverence. She passed her manager, whose eyes shone with unshed tears. She passed through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant without looking back. The applause followed her into the hallway, but she did not stop. She carried the sound like a storm behind her, leaving Damien Cross sitting frozen in the ruin of his own arrogance. The receipt for $10,000 was still in her pocket, folded neatly, no longer payment for humiliation but compensation for damage. And Damien knew, with a sick twist in his chest, that the night had not ended. It had only begun. The morning sun pushed its way between glass towers, gilding Manhattan in pale light. From the penthouse of his Park Avenue high-rise, Damien Cross usually began his days with flawless efficiency. 5 o'clock workouts, black coffee, dry toast, and market reports while his assistant briefed him on mergers and acquisitions. Precision was his creed. Control was his nature. But not this morning. Damien sat at the edge of his immaculate bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His scotch glass from the previous night still stood on the counter, a faint amber ring clinging to the bottom. The taste of applause still haunted his ears. The image of Katerina Volkov, hair loosed like fire, feet whispering across marble, eyes burning with defiance, was carved into his memory. His assistant, Margaret Davies, entered at 7 sharp, a tablet balanced in one hand. "Sir, your preliminary call with legal is scheduled in 20 minutes, followed by the board review." "Cancel it," Damien said flatly. Ms. Davies froze, her polished composure cracking for a split second. "Cancel, sir." "You heard me. Clear the morning." His voice was quiet, but firm, the tone of a man unaccustomed to repeating himself. Ms. Davies adjusted her glasses. "Very well. Shall I ask why?" "I want you to find someone for me." He rose, pacing the length of his vast living room where steel and glass reflected his every move. "Her name is Katerina Volkov. She worked at Etheridge, the restaurant." Understanding flickered across Ms. Davies's face. She assumed he was protecting himself, managing fallout. "Shall I arrange a severance package? A non-disclosure agreement?" "No," the word cracked like a whip. "No money. No contract. I just want to know who she is. Everything. Employment, education, family." His voice softened, unusual for him. "Be discreet." Ms. Davies inclined her head, hiding her surprise. "Yes, sir. By noon, a thin file landed on Damien's desk. He opened it with a speed that betrayed his own impatience. The words blurred for a moment before they came into focus. Katerina Volkov, age 24. Born in St. Petersburg, Russia. Parents, Anya and Dmitry Volkov, principal dancers with the Kirov Ballet. Immigrated to the United States in 1999. Both deceased in a car accident 5 years ago. Survived by younger brother, Nikolai Volkov, age 19. Severe injuries sustained in same accident, ongoing treatment for systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Patient at St. Damien's Hospital for Children. Further down the page, Damien found her education. Admitted to Joffrey Ballet School at 16 on a full scholarship. Prodigy. Withdrew at 19 after accident. Employment since then, waitress, barista, coat check. Primarily cash jobs. Current debt exceeds $400,000, largely medical. No significant assets. He read the file 3 times. Each line struck harder than the last. A prodigy robbed of her stage. A woman who traded point shoes for serving trays to keep her brother alive. He had dangled $10,000 before her like a leash, believing he could buy her dignity, when in truth, she had already sacrificed more than he could fathom. His chest tightened with something he had not felt in years, shame. Not the shallow kind that could be brushed away with arrogance, but the deep, unrelenting knowledge that he had been cruel. Damien closed the file. His reflection stared back at him from the polished glass of his desk. The man who looked back was not the one he had cultivated, the conqueror, the king, the untouchable. He looked like someone caught in his own misjudgment. He rose abruptly and crossed to the window. Below, the city pulsed with life. Contracts, algorithms, markets, all of it suddenly felt weightless compared to what he had seen in Katerina's dance. She had exposed him, not by words, but by truth. And truth had cut deeper than any rival ever had. Ms. Davies re-entered quietly. "Sir, shall I prepare a discreet settlement regardless?" "It may." "No," Damien said again. His voice was steadier now. "No settlements. No silence. This isn't about protecting me." He turned from the window. "Get me everything about St. Damien's Hospital. Their programs. Their research. The doctors handling systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis." Ms. Davies hesitated. "That will take resources. Use them." His jaw set like stone. "All of them." For the first time in years, Damien Cross did not feel like the man pulling the strings. He felt like a man holding broken ones, searching for a way to weave them into something new. Night fell over the city again, but Damien did not return to his towers of numbers or his empire of glass. He sat alone, the file still open beside him, the name Katerina Volkov underlined in his mind like a wound that would not heal. For the first time in his life, Damien realized that money could not erase what he had done. But perhaps, if he dared, money could build something else. Something worthy of her defiance. The story had escaped the walls of Etheridge by morning. Not through the elite patrons, who guarded reputations like treasures, but through the staff. A busboy, quick with his phone and hungry for clicks, had captured a grainy video from behind a service station. By sunrise it was on the internet, and by noon it was everywhere. The headline read, "Billionaire dares waitress to dance. You won't believe what happens next." The video showed the smirk on Damien Cross's face as he tapped his platinum card, then the waitress stepping into the circle of light, hair falling, feet bare. It showed the explosion of movement, the raw grief turned to fire. It showed the ovation. Within hours, it had 1 million views. By evening, 10 million. The world named her the Angel of Etheridge. The Firebird in an apron. Speculation flooded timelines. Was she a fallen prima ballerina? A hidden prodigy? A woman wronged by power and rising in defiance. For Katerina Volkov, the sudden fame was suffocating. She had left the restaurant and gone straight to St. Damian's, where she spent the night by her brother's bedside, listening to the faint beeping of machines. Nico, fragile and brave, slept through it all. By dawn, when the morning nurses arrived, she slipped home, hoping for silence. Instead, she found her roommate, Jenna Morales, wide-eyed at the door with a phone in hand. "Kat, you need to see this," Jenna whispered, trembling with excitement. Katerina stared at the screen. Her own image stared back, blurred, distorted, yet unmistakable. She watched herself spin and leap, her face twisted with grief and fury, her soul exposed to the world. Thousands of comments scrolled beneath. Inspiring. Heartbreaking. Goddess. Survivor. Her stomach clenched. To them, it was entertainment. To her, it was everything she had tried to bury. "I have to disappear," Katerina said, her voice low. She unplugged the Wi-Fi router, turned off her phone, shoved it into a drawer. "He can't find me." "Who, the billionaire?" Jenna frowned. "Kat, look at this. Scholarships. Contracts." The American Ballet Theatre left a comment. "Do you understand what this means?" "It means pity," Katerina snapped. "It means charity, because a rich man decided to humiliate a poor girl. That's not how I go back. That's not art. That's a circus." Jenna's mouth tightened. "Or it's a second chance." Katerina shook her head. The $10,000 she had already sent to the hospital's billing department felt like blood money. Dirty, tainted by humiliation. It bought medication, yes, but at the cost of her privacy. The next 2 days were a siege. Reporters camped outside the building, their cameras flashing whenever she dared to step out. Neighbors whispered. At the hospital she wore sunglasses and a hoodie, slipping through back entrances to reach Nico's room. Fame, the world's great prize, had become a prison spotlight. On the third day, Margaret Davies placed a thin file on Damian's desk. "We've compiled everything," she said crisply. Damian read it again, the details gouging him with every line: prodigy, scholarship, parents lost, brother broken, mountains of debt. A life condensed into bullet points, but behind them he saw the truth: Katerina had not danced for money. She had danced for survival, for love, for something far greater than he could ever understand. His shame hardened into resolve. Sending her cash would be an insult. An apology would be hollow. But doing nothing was impossible. "Cancel the rest of my week," Damian ordered. "And get me everything there is on St. Damian's Hospital. Especially their work on systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis." "Yes, sir," Ms. Davies said softly, a flicker of something like respect in her eyes. That night Damian sat alone in his office, staring at a priceless Jackson Pollock on the wall. For years it had been his measure of artistry, a chaotic masterpiece that soothed his ego. Tonight it looked cheap beside the image burned into his mind, Katerina's body carving truth from air. He closed his eyes and whispered her name. Katerina Volkov. It no longer sounded like a waitress. It sounded like a reckoning. Rain slicked the streets of Queens as Damian Cross stepped out of a black Audi. He had left his Bentley and chauffeur behind, trading his usual armor of power for dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater. The building before him was old brick, weathered and weary, fire escapes zigzagging like scars. Apartment 4B. Katerina Volkov's address. For a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation, pressing the buzzer was the hardest act of his life. He waited, shoulders stiff, but no answer came. He pressed again. Silence. Just as he was about to retreat, the main door creaked open and a young woman stepped out. Pink hair, a silver nose ring, eyes sharp. Jenna Morales. Her gaze locked on him, widening in recognition. "You," she breathed, her voice edged with fury. "You've got a lot of nerve." "I need to speak with her," Damien said quietly. Jenna planted herself in the doorway like a guard. "So you can throw more money at her? Humiliate her again? Reporters are camped down the block because of you. Do you have any idea what you've done to her life?" Damien swallowed, shame burning his throat. "I know. I made a mistake. A terrible one. I need to apologize." "An apology?" Jenna's laugh was harsh. "That doesn't erase what you did. She's not here, and even if she was, she wouldn't want to see you." She hesitated, softened just enough to exhale. "She's at St. Damien's. With her brother. But leave her alone." She pushed past him and disappeared into the rain. Damien stood for a long moment, the hospital's name echoing like a tolling bell. He returned to his car. He could not ambush her there. A hospital was sacred. But he knew she had to come back. So he waited. Hours passed. The sky bled orange into purple as the city shifted from day to night. Damien worked from his phone, conducting business with mechanical precision, yet his thoughts never left Katerina. He considered her sacrifice. He considered his own life, paved with inherited wealth, ambition, and victories won without cost. He wondered, for the first time, what it meant to give everything. At last, near 9, she appeared. A small figure in a long coat, beanie pulled low, moving quickly with her head down. She scanned the street, wary of lurking cameras. Damien stepped forward. She froze, eyes flashing like a cornered animal. Her hand clutched her keys like a weapon. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Katerina," Damien began, taking a cautious step. "Miss Volkov to you," she cut in, her voice sharp. He stopped. "I came to apologize." "You came to my home," she snapped. "You had me investigated. Don't insult me with pretenses." Damien's throat tightened. "Yes. I did. I needed to understand." "Understand what?" Her voice rose, brittle with fury. "That people like me aren't props for your amusement. That our lives aren't line items on your balance sheet." His words tumbled out, raw. "They told me you were a prodigy. They told me what you gave up for your brother." At the mention of Nico, she flinched as if struck. Her eyes blazed. "You will not speak of my brother. You have no right." "I know," Damien whispered. "And I am sorry. What I did was arrogant and cruel. I will regret it for the rest of my life." The world saw the dance. They think they understand, but they don't. I do. And I am ashamed. Katerina's chest heaved. She had expected excuses, another offer of money. Not this. His shame disarmed her, but her anger held strong. "Your apology doesn't give me back my privacy," she said bitterly. "It doesn't erase reporters at my door. It doesn't stop people from looking at me with pity." Damien grasped for what he knew best, solutions. "Then let me help. My foundation can create a grant, cover Nico's medical bills, pay for your training. Whatever you need." Her expression hardened into stone. A mirthless laugh escaped her lips. "Name my price. That's what you think this is. Still a transaction. My life, my brother's health, my talent, it's not for sale, Mr. Cross. It never was." Her voice trembled but did not falter. "The 10,000 you gave me, I sent to the hospital. It bought Nico 2 weeks. That is the only exchange we will ever have. Thank you for that. Now leave. And never come back." She turned, fumbling with her keys, shoulders rigid. Damien stood in the rain, chilled to his bones. Her words echoed inside him, a final judgment: it's not for sale. He had thought the dance was her story. He was wrong. The dance was only the prologue. Her true story was integrity. And it was the one thing his fortune could never buy. The city buzzed with whispers and headlines, and Damien Cross felt each one like a blade. The tabloids painted him as a predator, a billionaire who tried to buy dignity with a platinum card. The viral video had become more than entertainment, it was a symbol. Millions applauded the waitress who defied him, while Damien himself became the villain of the story. Yet his concern was no longer reputation. It was Katerina Volkov. At dawn he made the call himself, bypassing his assistant for the first time in years. The line rang until a tired but steady voice answered. Dr. Anjali Sharma, Pediatric Rheumatology, St. Damien's. This is Damien Cross, he said. There was silence, then a stunned intake of breath. Mr. Cross. I understand you're leading experimental trials for systemic juvenile idiopathic arthritis, he said evenly. I want to fund them. All of them. New equipment. More staff. Clinical trials for the next 5 years. And I want a patient access fund to cover families who cannot afford treatment, beginning with Nikolai Volkov. Effective immediately. But my name is not to be attached. The doctor stammered. Mr. Cross, do you realize, this would transform everything? It would save lives. Just say yes, Damien said, his voice stripped of pride. Yes, she breathed. Yes. He ended the call with a heaviness in his chest that felt almost like relief. But money, he knew, was not enough. Katerina had rejected it once, would reject it again if it came as charity. If he was to make amends, he needed something greater, an opportunity, not a transaction. For days, Damien buried himself in a different kind of work. He met with directors of the American Ballet Theatre, members of the Joffrey Board, choreographers whose names carried weight in every studio. He asked not how to buy influence, but how to build something lasting. He listened. He learned about careers cut short by injuries, prodigies abandoned by circumstance, talents silenced by poverty. The idea grew, grand and unshakable, the Phoenix Initiative. A foundation funded with $100 million of his personal fortune. Its mission was twofold: full financial and medical support for young artists in crisis, and a state-of-the-art performance and rehabilitation center where art and healing could stand together. When he showed the proposal to his closest associate, Oliver Wren, the broad-shouldered man who had once whispered, "Perhaps some things aren't for sale," Oliver's eyes widened. "My God, Damien. This is extraordinary. What brought this on?" "You did," Damien said quietly. "You told me not everything has a price. You were right." Oliver studied him, and for the first time in their long partnership, he saw something different. Damien's arrogance had cracked, and through it shone resolve. Meanwhile, Katerina tried to stitch her life together. Each morning she rose at 5 and cleared a space in her living room, stretching muscles stiff from years of neglect. Slowly she reclaimed the language of her body. Pirouettes wobbled, leaps ached, but the rhythm returned like a buried song. Then, one evening, her phone lit up with a news alert. Her rival's name struck her like ice. Bianca Dubois, a former classmate from Joffrey, had given a statement to the press. Katerina Volkov was always unstable, Bianca had said. Her so-called performance was a breakdown, not brilliance. "I worry Mr. Cross is exploiting her for his own image." The article twisted like a knife. Words like unstable and manipulated seared into Katerina's skin. Bianca had stolen her voice before with whispers and sabotage, and now she was doing it again, feeding poison into the public ear. Katerina stared at Damien's unopened invitation on her table, the one offering her a stage at the upcoming Lincoln Center Gala. She had ignored it, too afraid of spectacle. But Bianca's words lit a fire that could not be smothered. If the world wanted to see her as fragile, as broken, she would show them strength. If Bianca wanted to write her story, she would take the pen back. She packed her worn dance shoes into her bag. Her pulse thundered with purpose. the Lincoln Center Gala would not belong to the elite. It would not belong to Bianca Dubois. It would belong to her. The Lincoln Center shimmered like a crown of glass and gold. Inside, the air pulsed with wealth and anticipation. The Fall Gala was the pinnacle of New York's artistic calendar, where socialites in gowns and critics with sharpened pens gathered to judge, to gossip, to applaud. This year, the name on everyone's lips was not a dancer from the program but the waitress who had gone viral. Damian Cross stood in the grand lobby, his tuxedo immaculate but his posture different. The arrogance was gone. In its place was quiet gravity. He greeted patrons with polite nods, but his eyes scanned the crowd, searching for one face he doubted would appear. He had sent a simple invitation to Katerina Volkov with a handwritten note, "This is not charity. This is a stage. It is waiting for you, if you want it. No strings attached." She had not replied. Backstage, Bianca Dubois adjusted her emerald gown, her smile radiant for cameras but her eyes sharp with malice. She had fed lies to the press, painting Katerina as unstable, manipulated, fragile. Tonight she would cement herself as the star. Or so she believed. Across the city, in a rented studio in Brooklyn, Katerina tied the laces of her worn dance shoes. The invitation lay on the bench beside her. The article on her phone still burned in her mind, "Billionaire exploits waitress dancer. Sources claim she is unstable. Bianca's poison." Her chest tightened, but it was not despair. It was fire. She grabbed her coat, slipped the invitation into her pocket, and headed into the night. At Lincoln Center, Damian was in quiet discussion with Oliver Wren when the stage manager approached. "Sir, we have a change," the man stammered, bewildered. Damian turned, and froze. Katerina stood there, hair pulled back, eyes fierce, a storm in human form. "I saw the article," she said, her voice low but unshaken. "It's a lie. You offered me a stage. I'm here to use it." For a moment Damian simply looked at her, struck by the steel in her posture, the fire in her gaze. Then he faced the stage manager. "The program has changed. She's on now." The curtain rose. Gasps rippled through the audience as Katerina stepped into the spotlight in simple black attire, no sequins, no adornments. Just her. The same woman the world had seen in a blurry viral clip, now standing before the elite on one of the greatest stages in the world. Bianca, waiting in the wings, went pale. The music began, a single cello, low and steady. Katerina moved. But this was not the furious outpouring of grief she had unleashed at Etheridge. This was mastery. Every arabesque carved strength into the air. Every turn radiated control. Her body spoke a language of defiance, each movement a rebuttal to Bianca's lies. Stable. Strong. Unbreakable. She leapt, suspended for a heartbeat against the glow of chandeliers, and landed with a precision that silenced even the critics' pens. Her finale came not as collapse but as triumph. She rose tall, chin lifted, gaze sweeping across the hall until it landed on Damian. Silence. Then thunder. The entire audience surged to its feet in ovation, applause crashing like a storm. It was not pity. It was reverence. Katerina walked off stage, her breath steady, her head high. She passed Bianca, whose painted smile had cracked into ash. Katerina did not spare her a glance. Victory needed no acknowledgement. In the shadows, Damian waited. For the first time since they had met, there was no gulf of money or power between them. Only respect. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For the stage." He nodded, voice rough. "And thank you, for showing them who you are." He did not offer a check. He did not offer hush money. Instead, he extended his hand. The Phoenix Initiative needs an artistic director. Someone who knows what it means to fight. Someone who can build a stage for others. Not charity. Partnership. Katerina looked at his hand, then into his eyes. She saw not a billionaire trying to buy redemption, but a man who had learned the value of what cannot be purchased. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. In that moment, a new story began. Not of arrogance and humiliation, but of resilience, second chances, and the fire of art that no fortune could extinguish. This story reminds us that true worth cannot be measured in money or power. Integrity, resilience, and hidden talent can shine brighter than wealth or arrogance. Dignity is not for sale, and respect is something that must be earned, not bought. This is a fictional story created to feel realistic, so that the lesson within it can inspire us in our daily lives. Thank you for watching and spending your time with us. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to leave a comment, click the like button, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories filled with meaning and inspiration.